My guest this afternoon is Adrienne Celt. Her novel, her second novel, Invitation to a Bonfire, which I love this name of this book, came out a little over 2 months ago. Adrienne is a writer, cartoonist, and an avid reader living in Tucson, Arizona. Her debut novel, The Daughters, won the 2015 Penn Southwest Book Award and was shortlisted for the 2016 Crawford Award. Can't wait to see what this one's going to do because people have it's been buzzed about from Oprah.com, Harper's, Elle, all over the place, Parade, and I am thrilled to get to chat with you this afternoon. Welcome to Reading with Robin. Adrienne.
Hi, the pleasure is mine.
I am thrilled to talk to you. My first question is, how is Paul?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Okay, for anyone listening, Paul is my dog.
On Twitter and Instagram, and you can find Adrienne at adriencelt.com and all the social places. But I was fascinated with your puppy. I mean, I'm just such a dog person, so how is he? What happened?
He's okay. What happened was he tore his cornea, and we don't know how, but we just noticed one day that he's always had this one blinky eye, so for a whole day I didn't really notice. But he just got really sick, and he wasn't eating, he couldn't sleep. And so I took him to the vet, and I was just terrified they were going to say he was going to die because he's almost 14. But he's always been really healthy. People think he's a puppy.
Yeah.
And just to give people a picture in their minds, he's a mix between a Samoyed and a Chow, and so he's just white with cinnamon spots, and he's the cutest dog.
He's beautiful.
Alive.
I just want to rub his furry little tummy.
I do it all the time.
The pictures of him with it in I think he was hiding in one spot. You had a slide of him with stuck in a little spot and then cornered in. I don't know, it was really cute. He just looked very sweet and friendly and adorable.
He is. Yeah, he's a cute pumpkin. But I was putting antibiotics in his eye for 3 days. Or not 3 days, God, a week.
I was going to say, you finished the prescription. Right. Isn't that fun? Is it that thick? Are they drops, or it's that more like Neosporin kind of thing?
That's the ticket, the Neosporin one. But it didn't work. It didn't work. So I was already at the edge, on the edge, having been putting this in his eye 3 times a day, and I had to go back, and they said that he had too much scar tissue from the tear, so they had to essentially peel off a layer of his cornea, and then they drew blood and centrifuged it, and essentially made a stem cell kind of a treatment. That's not exactly what it is, but that seems like the best metaphor. And that I have to put in his eye now every 2 hours.
Is it time? I will talk quickly. I don't want to mess up Paul's treatment.
No,
wow, that's hard. That is hard. Yeah, does he handle it well? Do you have to give him a treat while you're doing it?
I've been like a mom giving her sick kid chips.
Whatever they want. Right.
Treats every which way.
Oh, this is Reading with Robin, but I much prefer talking about dogs. And your book, which was fabulous, Invitation to a Bonfire. We're very buzzed about book, very excited about it. I think we read it last winter. I don't remember. It was a long time ago, which is why when I have authors on, I would like to discuss dogs and what movies you've seen and what books you're reading, because I read the book so long ago. I can just say, don't miss it. It's awesome. But I want to hear about Paul. So that's the regimen that he's on now. Aww.
Yeah, well, and he was there the whole time while I was writing it. So he's spiritually connected to the book. It is funny how publication schedules work.
Isn't it?
You get, so many people get the book last year, and then this is the year that everybody is supposed to talk about it.
It's bizarre for me when I run into people because they want to know what I'm reading, and I always am reading things, 9 to 12 months ahead, more or less. So it's almost like, being in next year's fashion, but in my head and in a book. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm in 20 years ago fashion-wise, but as far as my reading, I'm way ahead of the curve. So I also like to remember what's out now, and I remember what I loved, but I do read them pretty far ahead, and I schedule everything pretty far ahead. So, but also for you, now you've written it, I don't know when you would have handed it in, so even a longer time ago. So as an author, what's it like talking about a book in June of 2018 when you finished with it, quite a while ago?
Yeah, this book had the unusual distinction that for me, I felt like I wrote it pretty fast. Although even still, the first draft I wrote between 2015 and 2016 in about 4 months, which was it's fast, right?
Yes,
I know
absolutely.
Some people are faster, and I don't understand it. That's like the max.
It's such a personal thing, Adrienne. But no, I would say by anybody's standards, that's quite impressively speedy. You know?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't question anybody's speed. Like you're right, like do what you want. But to me, it just like boggles my mind. And then I revised it.
Yeah.
And then I revised it for about another year. And then when the final draft, I probably turned in. Well, I know I did copy edits in September of last year, so the final big draft must have been before that. I don't know. I ramp up by doing a bunch of essays. So you're kind of already in the mindset.
Yes.
But it's a very weird state of performance. It's really different from the Zen state of writing a book. I mean, Zen in the best moments, in the worst moments, it's more like torture. But good torture that you want to be doing.
We've seen that movie. Yes.
Yeah. But
yes, I get
it. It's a privilege to talk about it. What I really enjoy the most is when people have questions about it that I wouldn't have anticipated. Because you end up getting a lot of the same questions, but then every so often it really sort of blindsided by an insight, or somebody is really moved by the book in a way that is special or unanticipated. And so that reminds me, like, oh yeah, that's right. This is a little piece of my heart that I tore out and sold in the store.
With Paul right by your side. And that is the truth, because it is so fascinating when someone connects to a part of a story that might have not been as central to the story, to the storyline, to the author, but to the reader. It takes on, you put your book out there into the world, and there it goes. And without giving a spoiler, because we never do that on the show, and I'll let you just talk a little bit about the story and the inspiration for it. But is there something you can share that was surprising feedback or a comment about the book that touched somebody that you were like, wow, that's meaningful, as you were talking about?
Well, I guess this isn't completely surprising, but I have been really moved by the people who have connected to Zoya, the main character, on the level of not only being a Russian refugee or, from the USSR, but also just being poor. I didn't grow up with a lot of money, and to me, so a lot of the things that Zoya endures are things that are either analogs of things I experienced, or just I never intended her experience to be completely singular as an outsider. She is a unique individual person, but at the same time, I think that as odd as her circumstances might seem to a contemporary American reader, she is also really relatable to a lot of people, which
Absolutely.
I find really moving.
That idea of an outsider, I think, translates into in so many ways. And one of the things I so much enjoy about reading a book and really getting into a character and connecting with a character are those pieces that you see of yourself, that I see of myself often, and not even realizing that as you're reading it and knowing why that is somebody that you really want to be reading their part of the story. I always think of that when I'm reading a story, and sort of goes back and forth, or which part are we talking about, and the parts that are most meaningful to me and enjoyable, and just like I can't wait to pick up this book and read it, are those connections to characters. You just get lost in it. And so Zoya is one of those characters, I think, years and years later, if I picked up this book or I was sharing it with somebody, I would say, oh, yes, I remember Zoya. And that's, when you read a lot of books, that's saying something. So
yeah, that means a lot to me.
Oh, I'm glad that I got the opportunity to share it. So talk about this book, this idea, this very clever book that you've put together.
Okay, so for those who have not yet read it, it's a love triangle that is and a murder mystery that's loosely based on or not even based on, inspired by the marriage of Vladimir and Vera Nabokov. And that marriage is famous in the literary world for Vera being the most giving spouse, sort of the spouse, who does everything for her husband, teaches his classes, licks his stamps, does his mail, does his typing. She did everything for him. Yeah. And I was reading a New Yorker article way back in 2015 or 2014, I think it must have been 2015, that it was reviewing the collected letters of the Nabokovs. And one of the things that it said was that most of Vera's letters were burned, are not in the collection because she didn't want her letter, or if they were both writing like a postcard home or something like that, she would actually black out the lines that she had written because she wanted the historical focus to be completely on Vladimir and his mind and his singular genius. Yeah, it's very intense.
Wild. Yeah, I would say so.
But the other thing I discovered in this one New Yorker review was that he had an affair, which completely blew me away. I had always viewed him as being somebody who, like, for all of his pretentious male genius faults, really loved his wife and knew what he had in Vera, which I think was also true. But still, he had this affair. He thought about leaving her, and I just started to wonder what somebody like Vera, who has really devoted her own brilliant life to somebody else, would do if that person did cast her aside and started sort of bucking off her recommendations. And that was the original germ of the idea.
I love that. Isn't that cool? Like so as you're reading this article, you're thinking, I need to know more. I need to explore this. And it's interesting, like that kind of a wife, you'd almost think she'd just want everything. I mean, somebody that's licking your stamps, you'd think, if he needed to have a extramarital situation going on, almost encourage it or plan it to like her own specifications in some way.
Right.
It's just like very interesting to think about that. Or maybe the poor woman needed a friggin' break. I don't know. Now,
well, she did. She begged. She wanted him to come back. Who knows what went on, what she felt.
Right.
But she did not. She didn't kick him out when that happened. She was like, no, please don't leave me.
I know women like this. Yeah. And even years and years later, that would be the case. It's very interesting. And I'm getting so lost in the story. I'm speaking with Adrienne Celt. Invitation to a Bonfire is out this summer. It's out. I can't believe it's the end of the summer. I mean, this book came out in the beginning of June, and so the summer is just always so short. But I don't know, somehow every summer gets shorter and shorter. That's like an old person thing to say, but it seems to be true. But so much buzz about this book, and I've been looking forward to speaking to you. So this is really a treat. Visit AdrienneCelt.com. Find her on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and I was all over your Instagram checking out your sweet Paul to see how he was doing, and I promise to end this interview before you need to put his drops in again.
I appreciate that. He's snoozing right now. I just fed him a lot of tuna fish. Yeah.
Oh, so he was with you while you were writing the book. Does he stay by your side or by your feet so you can write and pet? Is that what he does?
Yeah, most of the time. He does a little bit of a mixed thing. I have a writing studio out it used to be a garage, so it's separate from our house. And about half the year, he loves being out there with me, and because our floors are hardwood, and out there I have a big rug that he gets to lie, scratch his back on. So a lot of the Instagram photos you'll see is of him on that rug, just being a goof. But my husband also works from home, so about the other half of the year, Paul is just I don't want to go out to the studio. The studio smells weird. I'm going to come inside.
Isn't it funny how they think and how you can almost predict what they're going to do? In some ways, I don't know. There's this Reading with Robin and the Dog Show. This is I did the show for many years on the radio, and I would anything that was dog focused. We had dogs in the studio. It's just there's just something about dogs, and the cat people always get at me for that. And cats are very nice too. If you have a cat, that's very nice.
My dad had a dog and a cat for many years. we had these 2 kittens that we got, my little sister and I got for Christmas one year. They were brothers.
Aww.
And then my dad got a puppy for my brother, then, I don't know, 6 months later.
Uh-huh.
And
was this an experiment?
I don't know. It was a weird choice, but one of the cats, when the dog came, ran away, and the other cat, who's actually stolen by our neighbors, they just started feeding him and kept him.
Awful.
And yeah, we ended up letting them do it because it didn't seem worth fighting them over. I mean, we talked to them about it a lot and explained, he's not underfed, he's just playing you for more food. But he didn't like the dog at all, and the other cat really did. And since they were babies together, they grew up for 14, 15 years and lived in the same house, and they had this antagonistic relationship if you were watching. They would chase each other and play and bat at each other, and then sometimes you would just walk into the room and they would be lying down together, licking each other. And then they'd see you and be like, oh no, you didn't see this.
It's so funny. They're just so entertaining, and to watch this, and then to do the play-by-play in your head, and you figure, it's matching up with what they're doing, or they're like, what, these people are watching us and they're making up storylines. We're just hanging out, but what's happening.
If you're like me and you work from home, you're with your animal all the time. So
we are.
It's really hard not to.
That's what we do. I mean, that's absolutely what we do. Sometimes we go out and do our work and give Benny a rest, but other than that, we're just fascinated and staring and all of this. It's just a constant cycle of we should work. Oh, look how cute. Look what that's what happens. So to your name, you were telling me earlier there's a story about Celt, and this is where I am speaking with Adrienne Celt. You can find her on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and the website adriennecelt.com. Invitation to a Bonfire is the second novel. Well, one thing is I want to hear about your last name. Second is what's different this time around with the second novel.
Oh, sure. Okay, my name is actually an interesting segue to talking about my first novel a little bit. So Celt, we were discussing it because a lot of people pronounce it Celt because it's spelled C-E-L-T, and I mentioned that it's actually an acronym. My grandfather used Celt as his pen name when he was writing about being a Polish courier for the Polish government in exile during World War II. He was a paratrooper for a group called the Cicho Ciemni, which translates roughly to the dark and the silent. And he was the only Polish paratrooper to survive two drops into occupied Warsaw.
That is unbelievable. Wow.
Yeah. Wow. It's wild. Yeah. His stories are wild. And so his last name was Chuk, which starts with a C, and the E is my grandmother's name, Eva, and the L was her maiden name, Lovell, and then the T is Tadeusz, which was my grandfather's name.
Oh, that's so meaningful. Celt. Wow. No wonder you want people to pronounce it properly. It's even more meaningful. Yeah.
So the reason that's a good segue to my last book is because the daughter is partially based in Poland. It's a generational novel about 4 generations of women who have been raised to believe that each generation will be more beautiful and musically talented at a cost because of a deal with the devil.
Oh, I can't wait to read this one. I didn't know that book, so I'm really excited. That sounds like my kind of book, too. So
I like it. But a lot of the story, there are sort of 2 different versions of history that I tell in that book through stories that are told to the protagonist, Lulu. And some of them are told by her grandmother, who escaped just before the occupation in Poland, and has survivor's guilt because she's the only member of her family who survived. Wow. And so she tells these fairy tales about the town, about a woman being swallowing a star and exploding, and that's how the town is destroyed, about this magical person, and all of her stories are told sort of through a glass darkly by Lulu's mother, Sarah, who says no, it's survivor's guilt. They were all murdered in the war. Your grandmother had an affair, and that's why I was like that's where I came from, and she's hiding all of these stories underneath this whole deal with the devil mythology. And those stories didn't directly come from my grandparents, but they are definitely inspired by the feeling I have about my grandparents on both sides, really. They're just, both of sides have these mythological underpinnings, but they're not myths, they're real. And every time I talk to my dad about them, I say, like, I feel like I'm exaggerating this. Is it true that my grandmother was walking over a bridge and then it exploded and her back broke? And he's like, oh, yeah, no, that's true. And then he'll tell me, like, some other crazy thing.
Did you sleep well as a child, Adrienne? I may not sleep well just thinking about this. It's fascinating, though, because stories are sort of passed down, and you wonder if something is exaggerated. But, like, things happen. And so, and really they're passed down. I wonder how far back some of these stories go. Do you know how far back your father knows, like, some of the great-grandparents, great-great, or...
I mean, I got very caught up in the ones just from the generation before him because there are so many, but he has been doing some research recently because my grandmother was thinking about moving. She still lives in Munich, actually, and she was thinking about moving to an assisted living home.
She better warn them. She may be a liability. Sure.
Yeah.
It's a good idea. No, I'm kidding.
Well, she's too spunky. She wouldn't do it.
I bet. Yeah, that's...
She bought a place and then she just backed out at the last minute. She's like, no, this is my house. Just get a nurse.
She sounds very entertaining. Does she live in Tucson or no?
Oh, no. She lives in Germany.
I'm sorry. You said that. Yeah.
Yeah. After the war, my grandparents both worked for Radio Free Europe because Poland, after the Nazis left, they were kicked out by the Soviets. And so Poland was occupied by the Soviet Union for a long, long time. And they didn't want to live there either, so they ironically ended up in Germany. And the plan was for my family to all emigrate to America. So my dad was a citizen. I think he got his citizenship when he was 12 or something. He was actually born in Paris. And my husband and I are going at the end of September to Paris, and we're going to stay for a few days in the hotel that my grandmother and he stayed in that was, like, in their neighborhood near the Place Pantheon. So I'm really excited about that.
Oh, well, if that is an inspiring place to be writing and just being, that is, what a beautiful time of year, too. It's so neat how everything sort of comes back, and you can be in places that were so meaningful, and the hotel still stands, right, even though your family's been there? Okay.
Yeah, it still stands. Oh, and what I was going to say was that he has been telling me some stories about farther back in our family history, and the only ones that I remember, and you'll understand why immediately when I say, is there are 2 separate instances of literal skeletons in the closet.
Wow.
One of them was a bride who was caught in a trunk during it was her wedding, and they were playing hide and seek, I think, and she just got locked in a trunk and died.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow. What?
I know. Well, it didn't sound like it was a super happy, wanted marriage, so it's possible.
Maybe she was hiding. Maybe she was, wanted to just permanently hide, keep seeking.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Wow. Yeah, well, there were a lot of arranged things, and, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other one was a guy who ended up, he, locked himself in his own old-time panic room. He had, a secret room behind a bookcase, and somehow he got locked in there, and nobody knew. I think most people didn't even know that it existed, so they didn't know to look for him. And then eventually, 50 years later, a butler opened it and was like, oh.
Oh, wow, Little Sarah's Quiche. That's, ugh.
Yes.
Yeah, wow. Ew. I am totally not sleeping tonight. I'm on the phone with Adrienne Celt. She's telling me stories, and this is, absolutely fascinating. And so when you grew up with these stories, the idea of writing, and you must have so many storylines running around in your head.
I do. I think it didn't keep me up at night or anything like that. I've just always been obsessed with narrative. I love stories. I love books. I love TV. I love comics. So I've always been hungry for that, and it never seemed weird to me.
Yeah. No, I also love family lore, and whether it's somebody's interpretation of the story or exactly what happened. We're always getting down family stories, and it's endlessly fascinating to me. And you were talking about your comic. I love in your bio, what did it say? That you publish a webcomic most every Wednesday. And what is that like?
Trying to be realistic.
Isn't it hard to do things weekly? Or, I mean, it's a challenge to get something, it's like we put so much pressure. So I love that you say most every Wednesday. This show airs on Tuesdays. And the summer I gave myself a little bit of permission to not. So, because, I don't know, it just felt like I needed to do that. And nobody was screaming about the lack of, so I suppose it all worked out. But, yeah.
I think that having a schedule really, really helps me in a lot of ways. Like having a schedule for writing, I usually write in the mornings. Having a schedule for comics, I draw my comics on Sundays and I edit them on Tuesdays and I post them on Wednesdays. And I I go to yoga Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I have a writing group on Wednesday. But having all of those things while the structure of it underpins my life in a very helpful way, it's also extremely pleasant to skip some of them sometimes.
Very
the
freeing.
more regular it is, the better it feels to not do it.
I agree, and I think it is really, especially when you set your own schedule and that's the way your time is structured, it's really important to have some, things that are on the schedule. I agree. And then for me it's also very freeing to go, not this time.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking with Adrienne Celt. We're chatting about a lot of things. Invitation to a Bonfire is her latest novel. It came out just a few months ago, and you can find out more information at adriennecelt.com, and information is on Instagram, Twitter, all over the place. And you did you had your book tour, and I noticed you did different events. What's your favorite kind of book tour or event, whether it's you up there alone talking and taking Q&A in conversation with one person on a panel? What's like your ideal setup for sharing your book?
I think either with another person or with a panel for sure. Because I've done a bunch of solo appearances too, and they're fun, but there's a lot more pressure, and it's hard for me to feel very much feedback from the audience, because at least until you start doing the Q&A, it's really just you up there as this expert reading in a quiet room, whereas if you have an interlocutor, they can ask you questions, you can ask them questions. It becomes more of a conversation and a free-flowing series of ideas. And a panel is also I'm always surprised by the energy and the breadth of questions on panels. So I find those to be the most fun for me, and I think also the most fun for audiences.
That would be my opinion. I'm always interested to know from the author's perspective, because you've sent on many different events and cities on tours, and just also throughout the year invited to festivals and those sorts of things. So I always wonder what the preferred method is. And when I'm invited to be a moderator and there's a structure already, I'm always I always think, well, I don't think I like the way you're setting the structure up. And I have to be reminded it's not because I host my own events, and so I know how I like to do them. And as a matter of fact, tonight we have our reading series tonight, which we so wanted you to come to, and I guess it just didn't work out with the maybe with your paperback when it comes out in paper. But we
keep on my publicist.
I know that my daughter. Yeah, well, we're not subtle, shall we say? So I know that that was on our list, and hopefully when it's out in paper. But that's a very different structure than when I host my Reading with Robin events in panel discussions, and that's my preference. And one of the things that always seems to happen on the panels is there's usually a unifying theme. Well, certainly there's a reason that authors are put together on a panel, but there's usually something that comes out where everybody has some bizarre connection to something that you never would have thought would have come up with the book. It always happens, right?
Absolutely.
I sit there and I go, I can feel it coming, and it just blows me away every time it happens, and I can sense it, and I don't ever know beforehand because we don't talk, I don't even send out the questions. It's just free flowing, like you say. So I look forward to being on a panel with you one of these days. Can you imagine that?
Me too. That would be great.
That would be so much fun. Before we let you go, because it is Point Street Reading Series tonight, so I realize I need to walk Benny before we go. What are you reading and loving, blurbing, that you want to share with the Reading with Robin audience?
Great. Yes. Okay. So I have on the Nabokov track. I just read and did a Q&A with Sarah Weinman, who wrote the real Lolita.
Yeah, I haven't read it yet, but yeah,
it's so good. It's so good. If anyone is interested in true crime, it's a mashup of a true crime novel about this girl named Sally Horner, who was essentially the inspiration for Lolita, although Nabokov denied it. So she intermixes that story with the story of Nabokov's sense of building up the mythology around his artistic vision. So that's great. And I just also read based on a true story by Delphine de Vigan, which came out I think 2017 in the U.S. But it was a big deal in France, and I don't know if I have not heard anything about it in the U.S. But it's excellent.
Oh, I'm glad I asked.
Yeah, it's this creepy story of friendship. It's sort of a single white femaling, but also a question of who is writing this story, whose voice, who does the story belong to when it's happening between two people. It's eerie and uncomfortable and beautifully written, and I definitely recommend it. And then the last one I'll say is I just read, if you read Erica Swiler's The Book of Speculation, she has a new book coming out called Little Twitch next year, and I got to blurb it, and it's so good.
Oh, I'm writing that one down because I love this. And some people were just, maybe I wonder if they're talking about the new one, so I just kept seeing The Year of Speculation. So Little Twitch. Mm-hmm. I'm already calling it Little Twit in my head. Oops, sorry. But those are great recommendations. People always love to know what the authors are reading, and time is so precious, and we just love to share the best of the best. And Adrienne Celt, that's Invitation to a Bonfire, and visit Adrienne's site at adriennecelt.com for more information. And we hope that when the paperback's out, we'll have you to Point Street Reading Series. We would love to have you here.
I would love to do it.
And we will stay on your publicist. Did she hear that?
Okay.
She's listening.
She'll hear it.
We're on it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.